Hola a todos, tudo bem? Welcome to the Frank Shito Show, where we talk about cultures and history from Ghana. Today we're gonna be doing more about history. We're gonna learn about the first contact that the Gold Coast, later known as Ghana, had with the Europeans. Who were the first Europeans to visit our coast? This is the Frank Shito Show. Don't forget to put that shit on anything. Welcome back. So, who were the first Europeans to make contact with the Gold Coast? It was the Portuguese, as the name suggests, right? Portugal versus Ghana. I'm also doing this in homage to the relationship that Ghana has with Portugal. Our relationship transcends football. It goes way back into the 15th century. So, let's start this journey, right? It was in 1418. That's where this whole story began, when Prince Henry the Navigator first sent ships to explore the coast of West Africa. Back then it was called Guinea. During that time, the regions in West Africa were not mapped out yet, so the whole region was known as Guinea, and even the peppers in that region are called Guinea peppers, right? So during the 15th century, Portugal wasn't a powerful nation, as powerful as countries like Spain, but they were really smart. So they invented La Caravella. They engineered this type of ship. In English, it's called the caravel. So La Caravella is a small, highly maneuverable sailing ship that the Portuguese used during the Age of Discovery. The Age of Discovery was when Europe, especially Portugal, later on Spain, set out to discover what lies outside of their shores, and this brought them to the coast of West Africa. So I commend Portugal to be very smart in designing La Caravella. You know, you can't be broke and foolish at the same time. You can't afford to do that. And since Portugal wasn't that wealthy, they were smart. I'll read you this quote by Jim Rohn. He says that there's nothing worse than being stupid. Nothing. I mean, being broke is bad, but being stupid is awful. And what's really bad is being broke and stupid, right? That's about the end of the world. There isn't anything much worse than that, unless you're sick. Sick, broke, and stupid. I mean, that's it, right? There's nowhere else to go. What was the main motivation that sent Portugal to, discover more? Like I said, they weren't as wealthy, and back then, during those times, countries were conquering other countries in Europe. Regions were waging war against regions. So if they notice any weakness on your part, if they notice that your country is weak, they will send their fleet, their soldiers, and conquer and annex you to their own territory. And Portugal didn't want to be a victim, in this regard. So they decided to, strengthen their nation and also extend their territories. They had their sight on regions in Morocco, to conquer and add to their territory to make them stronger and more powerful. Like Lord Varys says in the Game of Thrones, in the sea, the big fish swallows the small fish, and I keep paddling. And that's what I seek to do. I'm gonna give as objective a perspective as possible. No reason to be emotional here. We're just talking about historical facts. Your ancestors, my ancestors, we all started wars, conquered, and did all of that. So as subjective as possible. All right. So the main reason why they decided to come to our coast, you need to understand the geographical location of Portugal. They were in high proximity with North Africa, so they had relationships with them. They saw that the Arabs and the Berbers are the dark-skinned Africans that lived in the Sahel, in the Sahara region upwards to the North Africa. So the Portuguese realized that the Arabs and the Berbers had gold. They had access to gold, and they realized that the gold that they had was, obtained from West Africa, the alluvial gold. So this motivated them to, instead of going through the Sahara regions to cut through to West Africa, they, with the caravella, will sail to the West Africa in search of this alluvial gold, because to wage wars you need armies. To maintain armies or obtain armies you need wealth, and gold is wealth. So that motivated them to sail to our coast. Another reason is that the Europe had a taste for the fine things in India. So for them to get to Asia, they had to go through the Middle East, but the Muslims had created a "you shall not pass" in the Middle East. So for Portugal, instead of risking fighting and wars, they would rather sail across the coast of Africa, across the Atlantic, along the coast of Africa, cut through the Indian Ocean, and make their way to India. Just like Christopher Columbus, he sailed the opposite way, the opposite routes to make it to India. And the popular goods that they liked in India was the spices. Most of the best spices in the world come from India. So another reason was that Portugal also had acquired a taste for the guinea peppers, so they will sail and trade with the people in that region for the guinea peppers. That was another reason, right? We need to understand the launch of such campaigns. People had to invest money. Even the engineering or the invention of La Caravella wasn't a small feat. Money was involved. People had to invest. And sometimes, the whole ship and the cargo on board, sometimes they sail and nothing returns. And, meaning a total loss of all investments. But that did not deter the Portuguese for, executing such campaigns. And the explorers and the navigators also cost money to hire or acquire them for such expeditions. And this costs a lot of money altogether. This investment was mainly made by traders in Portugal and also the Portuguese crown. So this is something that we can also learn. Fortune favors the bold, and the Portuguese in this sense were the bold. If you see a girl as a man, you should talk to her, because faint heart never won for a lady, right? So that was just by the way. So in 1418, from the year 1418, the Portuguese were not successful in their search for the alluvial gold. They weren't finding the gold they came looking for. But in 1471, led by Fernão Gomes, the Portuguese finally docked their ships in what was later to be known as the Gold Coast. They sat on their boats and paddled their way to the shores, to the beaches. And upon arriving, Fernão Gomes saw that they saw the Berbers and the Arabs, and they were the ones that they were, looking for, because the Arabs were like a trail to signify where the gold was at. So when he saw it, I'm sure his eyes lit up, and he saw that the locals were trading with the Arabs and the Berbers, for the alluvial gold. That's what the Arabs were getting. When Fernão Gomes saw that the Arabs and the Berbers were trading with the locals for the alluvial gold, his eyes lit up, and he recognized that the area had gold in abundance. So he called that place Amina, meaning the mine. And from Amina we get Elmina, and that is what the place is known to this day. But when he first reached that region, it was called Edna by the locals. Edna. Right. So from Edna we also have Elmina, right? That is the most popular, reference of that town. Fernão Gomes established his own trading post and enjoyed about a decade of favorable gold trade. It was like a rest under the shade of the banana plant, a sombra de bananeira. I know a little Portuguese, yeah. So that was what happened, and they traded metal knives, guns, gunpowder, rum, and other goods for the alluvial gold that the locals had. And it was a fair trade because it's supply and demand. The locals had the gold in abundance, and the Portuguese needed it. The locals didn't have the things that the Portuguese had, so supply and demand, prices, it worked out well. So business was booming for the Portuguese. And I want to give you a little perspective about the tribes that, or the tribe that the Portuguese made contact with. They were the Fantis. And the Fantis were a mixture of the Anakan tribe with the Guans, who are the original settlers in that region. 200 years ago, prior to that contact with the Europeans, the Akans had migrated from the ancient Ghana Empire to that region, and the Fantis had migrated south and were fully assimilated with the Guan tribes there. There are still unassimilated Guan tribes in the coast to this very day, but the Fantis were fully assimilated people, right? So in that time, there was no Ashanti Empire, no Akwemu Kingdom either, right? Everything was now beginning in that region. The wars had now started happening in that region as well. This is the French Shitter Show. I'm going to put Shitter on something. I'm going to take a little break. Catch me. We're going to be talking in the next half.
I've been